What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Enjoying the Review. I'm your host, Incomparable Zach Jones, and today I am going to be reviewing and recapping the latest episode of Daredevil Born Again. This would be episode 8, entitled Isle of Joy. And really, what am I, if not an Isle of Joy? Before I get into things, guys, I want to remind you, if you will, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave comments, thumbs up, positive reviews, all those good things. If you prefer to listen in audio form, you can also do that on your podcast catcher of choice. And you can follow me on social media on Twitter at Zach Jones Live, ZachJonesLive, or on Blue Sky at Enjoying the Review. All right, guys, let's get into it. I gotta say, I really enjoyed this episode of Daredevil. In fact, I think this might be either my favorite or second favorite episode of Daredevil Born Again. I want to say it was like episode 3 I really liked as well. I think I'm going to give this bad boy a 7.8 out of 10. I thought it was pretty dang strong. I'll hit the high points of what I liked, and then after that I'll get into the details of the episode in the recap. So one thing I'll say off the bat, I thought this episode had really good pacing. I felt that like this episode really moved, kept me engaged the whole time. Whereas some of the other episodes maybe had some quiet spots, slower spots. I thought this one really kept my attention the whole time, and was very exciting throughout the episode. I thought there were some good revelations that actually made logical sense. I guess I'll just throw up a spoiler alert right now. Towards the end, we find out that it was actually Vanessa that ordered the hit on Foggy Nelson rather than Wilson Fisk. And, it made sense, too, because, she was in charge of the gangs at the time. It happened. And so I was like, oh, I guess a simple revelation, but I'm like, I appreciate it because I'm like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. It's like it follows logic, and it makes the, they're definitely shaping the Vanessa character up to be, I think, play a more major villain part, which is also very interesting, and I like that development, so I enjoyed that. I also wrote down they finally are making the BB Urick character more interesting. I was a big fan of the Ben Urick character in season 1 of the Netflix Daredevil show, and I always thought it was kind of a bummer that they killed him off so soon. And then here I'm like, okay, they're introducing another journalist character, and it's his niece. I'm like, I think this has potential. But then so far in these episodes, they haven't really sold her on sold me that she is a character that I should really care about. And I think finally in this episode, with her conversation with the police commissioner character, I really liked that conversation. And I was like, oh, okay, she's actually more interesting. And it looks like they're giving her, something more interesting to do. And I was like, okay, I'm finally on board with this character, and actually, want to see how her character develops and where she goes. I do have one knock, and it's actually not against this particular episode. It's something that I noticed has been featured in almost every episode of Daredevil Born Again, if not several times an episode. And I would actually be perfectly fine with it if they did it once or twice. And what I'm talking about is, I would call it parallel scenes, where basically they will have a scene with Matt talking to someone, like in this episode, Heather, and at the same time they'll have Wilson Fisk talking to someone. In this episode, it's Vanessa. And they'll kind of do it as like, we're emphasizing that these guys are having a similar story arc in a slightly different way. There's parallels between these characters, even though they're foils for one another. And I'm like, okay, if you do that once or twice to, really emphasize something and make a point, I'm like, okay, I don't mind that storytelling technique. But I've noticed it in this season of this show. It's almost every episode. And like I said, sometimes multiple times an episode, they'll have these sequences. And I just think it loses its impact if you use it as a tool that much. So, if I had one critique of the writers, I would say watch out for that. Going forward. Again, it's a nice writing tool, and it can be effective, but I think it's been overused in this show, and so I would just say caution against using it so much. So not a specific knock against this episode, just something I've been noticing, and they do it again here in this episode. All right, guys. So yeah, like I said, 7.8 out of 10 is my score. I think it was a great episode. And now, guys, let's do a deep dive. By the way, let me know, for the guys who are watching this, do you like it that I do, the more deep dive, break down the scenes type of review? Or would you just prefer I do, a more shallow, general thoughts rather than the nitty gritty stuff? Because I could make shorter episodes that do that, but then I feel like it sets me apart if I do the more detailed breakdown. So just comment down below, let me know what you think. All right, so this episode we start off Bullseye is of course in prison for the murder of Foggy Nelson. He finds out he's going to be transferred from solitary confinement into general population in the prison. And of course, he doesn't like this because he knows this opens him up to, likely being killed if he's in general population. Now we move over to a scene with Fisk and Vanessa. They're on the streets, and he lets her know that the funding for his, Red Hook revitalization project is happening. And he also hints that he has a bigger plan for what they're doing in Red Hook. And I'm not sure what that is. You have to imagine it's something to boost his criminal, empire in some way. But I am curious. They seem to be seeding something here. So I'm curious, what his ultimate goal there is. So now we're, like I said, this is where they start the whole parallel scene thing in this episode. So now we're getting a conversation between Heather and Matt. So Heather, she's still shaken up over the fact that she killed Muse. She compares Daredevil to Muse, saying that they are both underdeveloped boys hiding behind masks, trying to make it look like something more sophisticated. And I guess you get that in a lot of superhero things where, so somebody will always make that, oh, you're no better than, the bad guy, just people in masks taking the law into your own hands, that type of thing. It's fine. I don't know exactly where they're going with the Heather character. I do think she's going to put it together that he's Daredevil. I mean, especially with the things that go on at the end of this episode, because it feels like he should be able to figure it out. But we'll see. We'll see. So Buck, who was, of course, Wilson Fisk's right-hand man, he knocks on Matt's door, and he asks to see Heather. Now we move over to Fisk and Vanessa. Fisk shows Vanessa that he has Adam in captivity, which we've seen in previous episodes. So I thought this was funny. I might be wrong here. I could have looked it up. I didn't. But I'm pretty sure Heather refers to this guy as Mr. Cashman. which means his name is Buck Cashman. And I'm just like, that sounds like a bad wrestling gimmick, like a $1 million man type character. Buck Cashman. Really terrible name. Anyway, he ends up giving Heather an invitation from the mayor to this black and white uh, like charity ball, big black tie affair type thing. We go back over to Fisk and Vanessa. He tells Vanessa that if he cannot be with her, then he cannot be. Wow, what a deep line. Now over to Matt. Matt asks Heather how she knows Buck, and she tells him that she cannot say because it is a work thing. Matt tells her that Fisk better not be a client of hers because if he's in her life, he's in their life. And, I said from the beginning when they first started going to her, I'm like, it can't be a coincidence. Like, Fisk has to be keeping tabs on Matt, and, he wants a lever over Matt if he needs it. Adam pleads to Vanessa to let him go. He's just like, let me go. I won't say anything. Just let me go. Heather's invitation, like I said, is to the first inaugural black and white ball benefiting the Red Hook Port Revitalization Project. Matt does not want Heather to go because he knows Fisk will be using her story and her trauma over what happened with Muse to boost himself, boost him and his vigilante task force, that kind of thing. Heather tells Matt that he should come with her, and he says he does not think that's a good idea. And he's also like, I wasn't invited. And she says, well, actually you were. It says me plus a guest. And he's like, yeah, okay. Although the way he said, didn't think he was too serious, but apparently we find, she thinks he's going along. We find that out at the end of the episode. So yeah, Adam, back to Fisk. Adam's pleading for his life. Vanessa takes Fisk's gun and she just, boom, caps him, shoots him. And so, I guess we're seeing her turn. She is fully in on the Wilson Fisk bandwagon. I guess they're back together, and she's all in. She's basically, if you had any doubts, she is now, I guess, the queen pin of crime. Fisk promises her that he will never leave her again, and she says, I know. And then they hold each other. And so, you got to figure it out. They're, like I said, they're on the same page. They're good. Now we get a scene with Kirsten McDuffie and Matt. Kirsten tells Matt about Bullseye being moved to general population. And she also says that Bullseye wants to talk to Matt for some reason. Matt asks who moved him, and she says that it was Mayor Fisk. So we get a scene where Fisk meets with his campaign managers and tells him that the task force is a success. Buck tells him that vigilante crime is down 30%. And Fisk makes Daniel deputy mayor of communications and praises him because he got BB to publish, basically a false story saying that the vigilante task force took down Muse and, Daredevil wasn't there. I gotta say, I don't know what they're doing with this Daniel character because I do feel like they're trying to play him like gray in the middle and like will he totally go over to Wilson Fisk's side, or will the small bit of good in him that BB tries to appeal to, will that eventually win out? I just kind of feel like the character is so kind of scummy that I wouldn't buy it if he tried to redeem him. I don't know. I also find it weird. Like, what we find out about BB later. If I was just like, oh, she's using him to get closer to get dirt on Fisk, and she didn't really care about him. I would almost respect that more than, her all, like, legitimately being friends with him. And I certainly don't buy them as like a romantic couple either, if that's what they're going for. Sheila, the female campaign manager, she thinks it's a mistake because Daniel's, he's new, he's inexperienced. But Fisk basically says he believes in Daniel, and again, very Trumpian, he likes a brown noser, he likes to suck up, he likes loyalty, that sort of thing. Matt can now we get a scene with Matt, Kirsten, and this client they are representing. But Matt can tell by his client's heartbeat that he is lying. And he basically tells him, I know you're lying. You should take a plea deal. And he barges out of the room. So Kirsten catches up to him. And she's angry because she's like, hey, we agreed to take this guy on as a client. And we owe him, the best legal defense we can give him. But Matt, he says he feels like nothing they do matters. He's like, what's going on with Bullseye? What happened to Hector? He says he feels like what they do feels useless. And they are not delivering justice. They are babysitting chaos. So this is a common thing in Daredevil, but I do kind of like that like, he doesn't actually want to be Daredevil, but he's always compelled to go back to being Daredevil because he can tell the system fails all the time. Even though on some level he believes in the system, he believes in justice, the scales of justice and all that, he can see for some people it just doesn't apply. And that's when he has to go above and beyond the law. So Matt, he goes to Josie's bar, and she lets him in. Like, the bar is like closed up, but she notices him standing out there and takes him in. And Cherry shows up. Look, Matt tells Cherry that they must have missed something with what's going on. He says Fisk and Bullseye are connected somehow. Cherry says that Bullseye was just trying to settle a score with Foggy. With Foggy, Karen, and Matt. But Matt's like, no, there's more to it. He knows there's something more to it. So Josie brings out the whiskey that Foggy was drinking the night he died. And I guess, and Matt was confused at first because he's like, that's not the normal thing Foggy would be drinking, And Matt puts it together that, Foggy would only been drinking that if he was like celebrating. And he would have been celebrating. He figures he must have been celebrating early because he knows he was going to win the legal case he was working on with that guy named Benny, who was briefly mentioned in the first episode. So now this encourages Matt to meet with Bullseye in prison. He asks him why Fisk wants him dead and if Fisk hired him to kill Foggy. Bullseye tells Matt that if he's going to talk, he needs to be outside. Which, I mean, I don't know what he expected here because, like, did he really think Matt could get like, somehow, put in an appeal? I think Matt even mentions, what, do you expect me to put in an appeal for you or something? Like, how could Matt possibly get him out of there? So Matt just ends up slamming his head several times into the table, and he calls the guard. And he tells the guard that Bullseye did it to himself. So now this black and white ball starts up, and Daniel apologizes to BB for going so hard on her, to change her story and toe the line that the mayor wants, and he basically got her to publish the fake story by threat, kind of threatening her. So the swordsman and the wealthy woman from that previous episode where Wilson was trying to get money out of them are at this party. I don't even know what the swordsman's real name is. That's all because I don't know if they've reset it, and I'm certainly not going to suffer through Hawkeye again. That's a fate worse than death. I guess I could just look it up on IMDb or something, but I just call him the swordsman. So Heather calls Matt and tells him if if he wasn't going to come to the party, he could have let her know, and he could have at least give her a heads up. So Bullseye gets stitches, because Matt bashed up his head, and he ends up. I guess Matt either busted a tooth loose in him, or maybe he did it himself with his tongue or something. But he got a loose tooth, and he spits it, really fast in the guard's eye. By the way, I'm trying to remember because I only watched the Netflix Daredevil. I watched all 3 seasons, but only once. I never went back. And I remember, towards the end of season 3, they do a brief there's a surgery they do on the guy that becomes Bullseye, Poindexter or whatever. And I'm like, how does that? What does it do to him exactly? It enhances all of his joint strength or something. It allows him to spit this tooth out at Mach 1. I'm not exactly sure what it does to him to allow him to do these things that he does. I'm sure there's some. I could probably Wikipedia his comic book character and find out, but it's interesting. Anyway, he injures his guard, and then he finds some scissors and he kills both the guard and the doctor that just worked on him. Heather tells Vanessa at the party that she is at the party alone, and Vanessa's like, "Well, I think we should fix that," and takes her. But we never see her introduce her to any other people or anything, so I'm not sure exactly where that seemed to go nowhere. We get a scene where Bullseye dresses as a guard and he gets on a bus that's exiting the prison. So back at the party, Vanessa tells Heather that she thinks her and Fisk have worked things out. So Matt shows up at the party now, and Heather's mad at him for not responding to her calls and texts. He tells her that he had to surrender his phone while he was meeting with Bullseye. And they're introducing a lot of conflict now with Heather and Matt's relationship, although I'm not sure how much I care about that. To be honest, if I ship Matt with anybody that's been on the show, I think it is Karen. Although I'm sure their relationship would be doomed to fail as well. And also, in the comics, Matt had a relationship with Kirsten McDuffie. So I'm in the back of my head, I'm like, they're probably going to explore that at some point as well. So I don't know. I just get the feeling that Heather is not going to be his girlfriend for a long time. We'll see. So while they're talking, Matt overhears Fisk and the swordsman agreeing to talk in private in a back room. Of course, this makes Heather mad at him some more because she can tell that he's not listening to her. Fisk tries to get the swordsman to give him money for his project. When the swordsman declines, Fisk threatens to sick his task force on him because he reveals, hey, I know you are this vigilante known as the swordsman. So I guess that video we saw in the last episode with the guy in the hoodie with the sword, I guess that must have, supposedly been. But again, like I said, I'm not going to rewatch Hawkeye again because I didn't like it. But it seems like he was kind of like a villainous character, all except for that last really terrible episode of Hawkeye, and then all of a sudden he's like fighting bad guys. And so I don't know, maybe he took a baby face turn there. I don't know. Anyway, the swordsman exits Fisk's room, and he seemingly agrees to. He caved in and agreed to give him money. Fisk notices a guy at the party taking pictures, so he sicks Officer Powell on the man. So they go in the back, and this guy is a part of the press. And Officer Powell threatens the man. And this is where Police Commissioner Gallo comes in, and he tells him, "Hey, leave this guy alone." But he basically assaults this guy right in front of Powell. Which, by the way, he puts his hand in like boiling like fry grease, and I'm thinking like that would like severely mess somebody up. Like I mean, I guess he would probably like still survive and just have like third-degree burns or whatever, but it would be pretty bad. I think even worse than the guy streamed in this scene. But Officer Powell basically tells Gallo that he does not answer to him anymore, and then the rest of the task force shows up to like kind of intimidate him even more. And again, this is all more seeding the fascism of Wilson Fisk, and how he's not afraid to straight up go after the press and intimidate the press, and So Daniel has a conversation with BB, and he's basically, you can tell he's envious of Fisk's power. He's like, what? Look at him. These guys are rich people. Are lining up to go in their room with him and give him money. And BB says, is that power or is it corruption? And she says her uncle always said they should speak truth to power. And she's like, is that what we're really doing here, Daniel? And questioning what they're doing, what he's doing. And I think he has a line where he's like, hey, I'm trying not to be an a-hole or whatever, but it's like, are you? Because again, I find this Daniel character pretty slimy. Okay, so this is a scene I really liked. So BB goes over to Commissioner Gallo, and she asked him if Fisk consulted with him when he formed the anti-vigilante task force. The commissioner tells her that he read her piece about Muse and that it was a bunch of spin, and everyone with half a brain knows that it was Daredevil that saved the day. And he asks her when she became Fisk's Minister of Propaganda. And she says it was about the time he became head of the SS. I really like this line because, it's all about that, what's that quote? Evil wins when good people do nothing. And so they're basically kind of pointing out that they both are kind of complicit in it. But then we'll both find out, they'll both kind of reveal to each other in this conversation that in their own way, they are fighting back. And so Gallows says, no, that's not the case. I'm not the leader of the SS. The task force is all Fisk's idea. Gallo asks her if she knows that Fisk was the prime suspect in her uncle's murder. And she says yes. And she says, why do you think I'm here? And she says that not everything she writes is under her name. And so this is where she became infinitely more interesting to me, because it's like now we see that she has an ulterior motive. She is, she pretended to be complicit, with Daniel last episode. But really, she is trying to get the dirt, probably trying to solve her uncle's murder ultimately. But she's trying to get dirt on Fisk. Um, she tells him that if he ever wants to put something real out there and put a dent in Fisk's white armor, to let her know. And she gives him her card with the email address on there, but it does look like Cole North sees BB give Gallo her card. So, are we going to get some conflict there? Where maybe either Cole confronts Gallo or he just tells Fisk, hey, I think there's something up between Gallo and BB. Gallo tells her that he has files on every crook with a badge that Fisk calls his task force. So, he's also fighting the good fight in a way, and it seems like he is going to, supply her with information to hopefully take down Fisk and the task force. Matt tells Heather that Fisk sought her out to get to him. Heather asks why Fisk would do that, and he says, well, why don't we find out? And he begins to walk towards Fisk to confront him. And it, like I said, to start with, this episode, it has good pacing and it has good dramatic moments where it's like, ooh, we're ramping up to something. And this whole end of the episode, I thought, had a lot of this where it was ratcheting up the tension and suspense in a very good way. But before Matt can get to him, a spotlight shines down on Fisk, and Vanessa joins him for the first dance. Matt tells Heather that Fisk is a monster, and she will not be safe until he deals with him. He then dances with her so he can get close to Fisk. Fisk speaks at a volume where he knows Matt can hear him, and he tells him, hey, you knew there would be consequences for being Daredevil again. Matt tells Heather that if anything goes wrong, she should contact Cherry. So we get a scene where a prison guard lets Buck know that Bullseye escaped the prison. And right at that moment, Bullseye shows up at the party and he grabs a weapon, and then we can see him going in an elevator to the top of, this large room. Buck interrupts Fisk and tells him about Bullseye. And then he's like, okay. And then him and Vanessa start dancing again. Vanessa tells Fisk that she has something to tell him. But he says, not here, not now. I think because he knows Matt can hear her, But I think Matt hearing, Fisk cut her off, gets him to start thinking, what could she have told him? Or what was she going to tell him? And so Matt then puts it together. Hey, it wasn't Wilson Fisk that hired Bullseye. It was Vanessa that hired Bullseye to kill Foggy. She's responsible. She was the one in charge of the gangs at the time that it happened. So now Matt cuts in and starts dancing with Vanessa, and he tells her that he knows she had Foggy killed. Heather tells Fisk that at first she was pissed off at Matt's behavior, but now she's just worried. Bullseye gets to the balcony of the ballroom with a gun. So, they don't show up, but presumably he, killed the guard with a gun with that, weapon he had taken from the restaurant or whatever. So Matt asks Vanessa if Fisk knows that she had Foggy killed, and she asks him if Heather knows that he's Daredevil. I do wonder, how Fisk will respond when he finds out that she had Foggy killed. I wouldn't think he would be that upset over it, but we'll see. They're setting some things up here anyway. Fisk asks Heather if she knows why Matt has a thing for vigilantes, although I don't think he ever finishes that line after what happens here in a second. Matt tells Vanessa that she will pay for what she did. But at that moment, Matt can hear Bullseye cocking his gun, and Matt ends up taking a bullet for Fisk. And then Fisk escapes while Heather checks on Matt, whose, shoulder is bleeding. And so that sets up the next and final episode of this season. I don't even know. A part of me thinks that even though the next episode is the finale, that it's also probably going to end on some sort of cliffhanger, just because I know they shot season 1 and 2 basically together, and they're already a substantial probably way through editing season 2. I'd like to see some more Frank Castle this season. We just got a glimpse of him in this season so far, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him. But I would like a little more, resolution with him, because I think he does need to have that scene where he confronts the cops with the Punisher tattoos and, kind of gets a glimpse of what Matt was talking about, like these guys co-opting his symbol, and like how will he react, both physically and mentally to these guys doing that. I think that's an interesting lane that I want to see them explore with the Punisher character. I'm also hoping that they don't do like another like abrupt, like Foggy death. Like, I hope they don't kill Vanessa next episode or kill Wilson next episode. Because then you are wasting character potential like they did with Muse, in my opinion. But no, I like this episode quite a bit, guys, and I'm excited to see how they wrap things up next week. But what about you guys? What's your predictions going into the final episode? What do you think's going to happen? What do you think? Will we see more John Bernthal Punisher? Will somebody die? Will something truly dramatic happen? Please comment down below and let me know. But guys, I think that's going to do it for this episode. So like I mentioned at the top, if you will, please subscribe to the channel. Thumbs up, comments, positive reviews. You can also listen in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. And follow me on social media on Twitter at Zach Jones Live, ZachJonesLive, can't talk. Or you can follow me on Blue Sky at Enjoying the Review. But guys, until next time, I hope you're enjoying the review. Bye, guys.